Hello Amazon class. So here today it's your instructor Mr. Bowie and I'm here to talk to you about the box model. So every HTML element is a box. When we create any new element, we're putting a new box on the page. We're coming up with the most important lesson in CSS. In the next several lessons, we will finally understand how to place any element exactly where we want it on the screen. Our first step is mastering position and layout and understanding the box model. What is a box model? So every element in the HTML can be thought of as a box. Our P elements, our H1 elements, our div, our UL, everything. So notice here, every box has the same four properties: the margin, the border, the padding, the content. So content, our text and images; our border, the visible border of outline around our content; our padding, the space inside between the content and its border; and the margin, the space outside of the border. So code example 1. The content and the border are easy enough to understand. In this P element example, the text is our content and we applied our border properties. So here P is 500 pixels, border is 5 pixels, solid black. So here's a great example of a box model. There you have a box, around there's a padding, a border line, inside it is a text. So we can adjust the margin to move the entire box to left or right or center it. So here it's gonna be moved to the right and you just do margin left 100 pixels. We can center the element by using margin auto. All right, so here this is just going to be centered by using the code called margin auto. We can use the padding property to make the content look nicer inside the border. By default, padding places space around the top, bottom left, and right side of the content. So here this is going to be padding inside, and this is going to be both ends of two stacks. It's HTML and CSS. You have your hypertext markup language and your cascading style sheets. Front end side now it's going to be colored up, and the front end of the web layout. So for example, how many pixels is in this box? If you do the math right, so you have 200 plus 20 plus 10 plus 30, you're going to have a total of about 260 pixel wide. All right. So most times we do not want this. We much simpler to tell CSS we want our box to be 200 pixels, and we have the content, padding, border all add up to an equal size that we want. We can accomplish this by using this code called box sizing. In general, you should set all elements to use box sizing, border box, so that the width and height properties apply to the entire box and not just the content of the box. Without box sizing, you can see here that these 5 boxes are not uniformed. Now with box sizing, you could tell that it's now kind of more uniformly matching. So all the width will be in uniform. And the key terms you guys want to remember for your next exam, which would be margin, padding, box model, and box sizing. And if you guys want to check out some additional resources here, you could just check out this website on developer.mozilla.org. Everything in CSS has a box around it. Understand these boxes are key, being able to create layout with CSS or align items with other items. In this lesson, we will take a proper look at the CSS box model so that you could build a more complex layout task with an understanding of how it works and the terminology that it relates to it. So here you need your prerequisites and your objective. You're gonna have your block and your inline boxes. So this is gonna be a little bit more basic foundation here. In CSS, we probably have 2 types of boxes: block boxes and inline boxes. These characteristics refer how the box behave in terms of page flow and in relation to other boxes on the page. If a box is defined as a block, we will behave it as it follows. The box will extend the inline direction to fill the space available in its container. In most cases, this means that the box will become as wide as its container, filling up to 100% of the space available. The box will break it onto a new line. The width and height properties are respected. The padding, margin, and border will cause other elements to be pushed away from the box. So unless we decide to change the display type into inline elements such as headings, H1P, block as the outer displayed by the type. If a box has an outer display type of inline, then The box will not break onto a new line. The width and height properties will not apply. Padding and margin borders will apply, but will not cause other inline boxes to move away from the box. So the A element used for links, span, EM, and strong are all examples of elements that will display inline by default. So the type of applied to element is defined by display property values such as block and inline and relates to other value of display. So you're gonna have your A side, inner, and outer display types. Example of different display types, display flex. So that's just a little bit more of additional resourcing. Here we have box size and MDN. So last one was about box model. So the box size and CSS property says how the total width and the height of an element is calculated. So here you just have a way to calculate the border, the width, the padding, the box sizing. So by default in the CSS model, the width and height you assign to an element is applied only to the element of the content box. If the element has any border or padding, this is when then added to the width and height to arrive to the size of the box that's rendered on the screen. All right. So here it just talks a little bit more for formality, and then your result of having your box sizing. So that's going to be about 5.1. Let's jump over to 5.2. The box model. So go ahead and work through these tutorials on Quack it first before attempting to solve the puzzle below. So you're gonna have your CSS padding properties. Here, go ahead and go over down to CSS or any reference grid layout, and you can learn a little bit more about cascading style sheets. Your CSS margin properties. After completing tutorials, try solving the following puzzle. So here, we want the padding size to look like this. So I'm gonna pull up my VS Code, open the folder on, let's go say, is it box? So here we selected the box, and we open the box, and we have our HTML linked to CSS solution. So right now, this is what it's supposed to. Right now, it's just giving us our output of different sizing of the box. We go ahead and pull up the terminal. Let's go change it to our directory. Alright, so I have it saved as the box. And we'll go ahead and open up the terminal of the 5.2 box model.html. So right now, we do not have it look like how it's supposed to be shown. So here, some of the things you want to change is the height, the padding, and the box. So if we just go into our coding, we go ahead and change some of that up. So here, I already have it coded down. Alright, so here, notice that 1 and 2, they don't have some of the margin and some of the height. So here you go over, you add a height, you add a padding bottom, set it to 125 pixels, 250 pixels, same thing here. Add an extra margin top and bottom pixels, and add a height to your box. So after when you're adding all these codes, it should outplay a different object. So now you have a better object. So the key difference, if you guys notice, so if you go over here, you could tell the difference that A's has a different sizing, box models, and so forth. So that's about 5.2. Went over. So tips: adjust the values of left and right margins to the box to bring the boxes closer together or further apart. Adjust the values to the top and right bottom margins to move the boxes up or down. Add or adjust the height to make the box grow and taller. Add on top padding to keep the letters vertically centered to the box. Don't add more than margin border padding than the total amount of the height width set. So that's just a little bit more. If you guys want to do a little bit more about calculating the box, you just open codepen.io, and here you could just enter a width that you guys need to. So if you just take 5, let's have it like a very equal all around size box. You can have a very 35 in total width and total height. All right, so that's going to be about 5.2. Let's go over to 5.3 about CSS Flexbox. So use Flexbox to create a responsive layout. So CSS Flexbox will be our go-to method of creating response layout quickly and easily. To turn on Flexbox, we use display flex. So here you have your div class. You're going to have a lettering from A, B, C to I. Close it off from your div. And then you're going to have a class called myFlexbox. And then you're going to have a display flex direction row. End it off with that function. And here, this will show that all of your letterings and your flex boxes will have a congruent relationship. So in a flexbox, our elements grow and shrink in relationship to each other. They'll fill up the entire parent flex element. So here's a simple 3-column layout with Flexbox. So here you have your a little bit of your text inside your div. You have your first Flexbox, your second Flexbox of your class. Then you're gonna have your display flex, and then you're gonna have your whole sizing of your box sizing. So after you have about 3 of your classes, this is what comes out. So the width 32 viewport tells CSS the element should be about 32% of the viewport browser window, and Flexbox even lays them out. If we want more elements than horizontal screen space, we could use the flex-wrap, wrap, to distribute them evenly in rows. So here you could just use this right here, flex-wrap, and this will distribute this evenly during a row. So here this is row and this is column in the matrix mathematical term. So a simple 2-column layout with a sidebar. So here you have your div class. Again, he talks about your items here, and then you're gonna have your article, and then you're gonna have your flexbox with your section, and then you're gonna have each of these will have your sizing. So here max width is going to be 25% of your space. Same thing, 75%, half of the not half but more than half. And then you're just going to have your styling, after which you're going to have your section, and then your nav bar, your sidebar, things like that. So in the example below, we specify a max width. The element should not grow beyond along with the flex value. Section has a flex value of 3. It takes up to 3/12 of a screen space but no more than 25%. The article has a flex value of 9. It takes up to 9/12 of a screen space but no more than 75%. When working with Flexbox, divide the Flexbox into 12 equal units. Setting an element to flex 2 means it could take up to 2 to 12 units. So when studying CSS, be sure to learn the details of a display flex, math widths, and flex. Seeing examples is a great way to learn. Go ahead and check out some of the additional resources such as Mozilla Firefox. It talks a little bit more about Flexbox. Flexbox is a 1D layout method of laying out items in rows or columns. Items to flex to fill additional space and shrink to fit into smaller spaces. This article explains all the fundamentals. So here you have your prerequisites of HTML, learn the basics and CSS works, to learn to use Flexbox layout system to create a web layout. So introducing a simple example. Here's a great simple Flexbox example. You have your 3 articles, you have your header. So this is just a great way to just use Flexbox, and you just use section, display flex. Another way, the A side and the flex model. So when elements are laid out as flexible boxes, they are laid out along 2 axes. So you have your X and Y axis, and then you have your cross axis, your main axis. So the main axis is the running in the direction the flex items are being laid out. So the start of the end of the axis is called the main start and the main end. So the cross axis is the axis running perpendicular to the direction the flex items are being laid out in. The start and end of the axis are called the cross start and the cross end. So columns are rows. So Flexbox provide a property called flex direction, and this specifies the direction the main axis runs in. By default, this is set to row, which causes them to lay out in a row in the direction your browser default language works in, left to right in the case of English browsers. So try following the decoration or section rules. So flex direction column, you see that it puts the items in the column layout, which will look before we added any CSS. So wrapping, same thing. Here we will see an example. Here we see the children are indeed breaking out of the container. One way which you can fix this is to add the following decoration to your section rule, flex wrap. Also add the following decoration to your article, flex to 200 pixels. Now try this, you'll see that the layouts looks much better than when it's included. Kind of notice. Then you have your flex shorthand. So here you have your flex shorthand. At this point, it's worth knowing that shorthand exists with the flex direction and flex wrap. And this goes on a lot about flex boxes. Here you guys could use, go to quackit.com, CSS Flexbox Examples. So that's going to be about 5.3. 5.4. So here, this talks about the CSS Flexbox. Number one, create a flexible box, create a website layout, and then create a nested flex container. So here I'm going to pull up a little bit about the Flexbox. Open up my folder. So the first one talks about how to create a flexible box. All right, so here we're going to talk about a flexible box. CD let's go ahead and pull up the flexbox.html. Here you're going to have a flexbox, inside the flexbox. You're pulling out the CSS Flexbox CSS. With that instead, you're gonna have your div class container. Inside the container, you're gonna have your red, green, and blue. Each paragraph out. I have some text in there. Then I head it out, and then my CSS. I display the flex of the container. I have my red class set to orange, flex grow to 1. My green to yellow, and my blue, my width to 440. This is gonna take about 40%. My viewport, and then I'm gonna have my container div inside, and I'm gonna have my font size to 5 viewport, padding 5.5 EM, and my color is gonna be white. So here, that's what's happening right now through my CSS external, my external file. So that's gonna be my flexbox.html. Now we're gonna work with the 5.3. So what was it? Our Flexbox web. So we're gonna check out our Flexbox web. So here it says create a website, right? So we'll go ahead and check out the website. So in my website, I'm gonna have a link to the style sheet of flexweb.css. I have my title, which is the website, header, website, div IDs. My ID is gonna be main, and then I'm gonna have my article, my navigation, and then my article side, and then I'm gonna have my footer, and then inside here I'm gonna display each of these, IDs and classes. So here I have my ID set to display flex main, minimum height calculate 100 viewport minus 40 viewport. Which you guys will know. Also, this is VH, and then here same thing aside. You have your flex, your background, your order, and then when that happens here, it calculates all that and has a you have your display flexbox of having a website. So that's a little bit more. Let's talk about the nest. So if I pull up my nest file, nest CSS, and also Flexbox nest HTML, you see here I have my link again to my CSS. I'm gonna have my head title, my body, my div class container, my div class with red, green, and blue, my div class green and blue, and I'm gonna end it off. Same thing, I have my classes here, and then each of them I have a display flex, background, font sizing, save it. Go ahead and open my nest.flexbox hit nest.html. There, same thing. Inside you can see that there's a flexbox inside the container. You can see a 1A and 1B inside the a flexbox nest container. So that shows a little bit more example on a 5.4. Let's go show you guys a 5.3 example of the next the flexbox example. So here, if I just pull up my flexbox example 1.html, and then this will be just an example of the flexbox example. See, you have your display, your flexbox, 3 of these, light out your sidebar, your text, and from A to I. That's just a little bit of overview of the flexbox. All right, so let me see if I can pull up some of the coding so you guys can see. So here you have your meta, you have your data, set initial scale to 1.0. You're gonna have your language to EN, your example, your link, which is gonna be to the first CSS. Then you're gonna have your div class, your flexbox from A to I, also your div class from flexbox 2, flexbox 3. Then you have some of your JavaScript. So click on me. If you have your console log, mouse over the element, your variable element. And so that's all you have for your flexbox. So that's a little bit more. Let's go ahead and jump over to 5.5, CSS Positioning and Display. So here we use position for our fine detail, position, and overlap. So this is probably the hardest lesson on CSS and can be difficult to understand. You guys can watch some of the YouTube videos at the end of the lesson to knock it out, to watch it and just to give a better understanding of the video. So we recommend using Flexbox, but if there's times when you need an absolute control over positioning, such as a case where you want elements to overlap each other, you could use the CSS positioning. So here we have block elements. Block elements can take up all the available space that it can. New elements sit on the line below. So here you have your div tag, your p tag, table tag, br, h1, and the inline elements. You have image, a, and span. So inline elements can take up only the space it needs, and new elements can sit to the right of the inline elements. So here the CSS property displays allow us to modify these default properties. A div can be changed to inline, and an image changed to block. So here you're going to have your hashtag border. All this is going to be coded, and then here this is going to be the output of the program. In this code we apply display inline to a group of div. They now appear side by side. Another feature of display is the display none. An element will display completely like it was never there. When set to display none, this can be used with a JS to toggle an element on the page or on or off. So here you have positioning. Up until now we only work with the kind of positioning, static positioning, which is one place. By default, all HTML elements have a static positioning, so you guys know that all your HTML was just just sit on just sitting positioning in one place, and it follows the rules of blocking inline elements. So the CSS property of position allows us to break away from the blocking inline rules. First up is relative. Relative gives us access to 4 new properties. So you have your left, right, top, and bottom. So here you just use position static, position relative, left, you can move it to 50 pixels. So this is your static one, and this is going to be your relative one. Same thing here, you move it to the top, 25 pixels. Some key points on relative. The element is moved based on where it would normally be if it were static. So the left moves the edge over to the X amount, top moves the top edge to down by X amount, right moves the right edge over by X amount, bottom moves the bottom edge up by X amount. So you guys kind of know that if I talk about moving it to the left, then you move this to the left, or you move this to the right. So next position is absolute. So absolute moves the element based on its parent element, not itself. The parent must not be static. So make sure when you guys have a position absolute, the parent must not be static, not be in one place. So last up is sticky. Sticky is a mix up relative and absolute. So sticky position starts off just like a relative. The difference is that when the element is scrolled off page, the position becomes absolute to the browser window. The effect is that the element sticks. All right. So when do we use relative, absolute, and sticky position? So number one, for fine details, complete control over positioning for when we want elements on the page to overlap. All right. So it's just a great way to just have like a great, a bookmark or a continuous text. So for the basic layout, we'll use a much easier Flexbox or grid. Here you guys could just go over w3schools.positioning and understand some of the positioning and understand the CSS display. Here they'll show show out this. So CSS layout position properties, you're gonna have your big of static, relative, fixed, absolute, and sticky. These are all 5 different position values. So that's a little bit about CSS positioning and display. So for the laboratory CSS positioning, begin this lab by reviewing the position down below. So here you can learn about the layout, of a static, a relative, a fixed, and then absolute. And you guys can go to the next. Have a little bit more in detail. Have a example. So here we recreate this web image by using the CSS position. So here you have use some of the positionings that are offered by CSS. So here I'm gonna show you guys a little bit of how that would look. So here, if I just pull up my VS Code, go ahead and I'm gonna open up a new folder of CSS positioning. Go ahead and pop into CSS positioning, and there I'm gonna open up my 5.6 position.html. Open that up, and then we're gonna open our file of HTML position. So here you will have your your head, your meta, your data, and then you're gonna have your initial viewport, initial scale to 1.0, your keywords, and then your language, and then your link. After which you go to your div class, and then you're gonna have your heading, your div class. Here you're gonna call out your left container, your right container, your box 1, your text box, and your box 2, and then you end it off with all your div tags. Here you're gonna have your classes. Here you're gonna have your position absolute. You're gonna have some of the your front end web development here. Same thing here. Have the correct position of absolute, and you could change it around if you guys wanted to have a sticky or have it relative or fixed. And after the which it will look like your box model position. So notice here that it looks like a simple website layout, but when you cascade it down or you minimize it, see how the absolute position is still moving, it overlaps some of the text. So that's just a little bit more. Even if you wanted to overlap more, you could do so, but it's just telling you that it has absolute control over some of the positioning. So that's going to be the end of lesson 5.6 and after lesson 5. So we'll you guys want to go over a recap over 5.1 to 5.6. We went over the box model. We went over went over some laboratories. We went over Flexbox. We went over the cascading Flexbox. We went over CSS positioning and display, and we also went over the laboratory of CSS positioning. So there, I'm gonna let you guys go. Happy coding and wish you guys the best.